On the Tape is presented by CME Group, where risk meets opportunity. iConnections, reimagining how the investment industry connects. And SoFi, get your money right all in one app. Well, welcome to the On the Tape podcast, a special Off the Tape, Dan Nathan. By the way, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys.
We're here with Ron Biscardi, the CEO of iConnections, and Kaitlin Malin, the COO, that's the Chief Operating Officer. That's what COO stands for.
That's
of
exactly what it stands
iConnections.
for.
And we're excited because our partnership has been a long-standing one. Our partnership is going to continue, and we're thrilled. And you have some news report in terms of what we're doing with Kaitlin going forward.
I really do. Welcome to the pod, people.
Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having
All right,
us.
so this is Caitlin's inaugural voyage
First.
on the Off the Tape podcast. Ron has been on the pod on a few occasions with us over the last couple of years or so. But the news that you're talking about, that you kind of alluded to, is that Caitlin's going to be joining you and me, Guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably going to be every other Monday for the Off the Tape segment. We've been doing that now over the last year and change or so. So we're going to be launching our second season of that, and we have a lot of great fund managers, a lot of really interesting insight who have joined us and talked about their strategies, their funds, the environment, and some of the trends that are going on in alternative investing space. So Caitlin's going to be joining us with that, guy.
And I'm thrilled about it. So let's get into it, Ron. You have built an amazing... First of all, we've known each other many, many years now. I consider you a dear friend. I hope you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
If you don't, just nod anyway. But you've built an extraordinary organization, and you've built a great team. And we've gotten to know Kaitlin over the years as well. So speak to us. How did you find Kaitlin? I mean, because she is a linchpin to the organization, without question. We've been to a bunch of the conferences. We obviously have weekly conversations, if not more often than that. I mean, how did that relationship come to be?
So I like to say I'm the CEO, but Caitlin is the person actually running the business.
Mm-hmm.
And that is mostly true. We actually met when iConnections was started. You may remember we did a big charity event to launch the business called Funds for Food. And I reached out to a friend at one of the prime brokerage businesses. It was actually Jeffries. And I said, hey, we're looking for someone who has fund marketing experience and knows the industry well, someone smart. We're doing this charity event. Can you introduce me to anyone? They introduced us to Caitlin, and Caitlin became the first employee and has really been absolutely essential in building the business. I mean, she has the product teams reporting to her, the event operations teams reporting to her. She built the original investor relations team. So there's almost nothing happening in the business that Caitlin isn't involved with in some way.
Caitlin, that's a leap of faith, though. You come out of college and you're in a career,
say the
right?
least, at that time.
You're working at a JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, a bigger firm with establishment and infrastructure, those types of things. And then you take what probably was a huge leap of faith on your part to join Ron and the iConnections teams. Clearly, that was the right decision. But what was the mindset? Speak to sort of the calculus that you did.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I was at a point where I was, quite frankly, I was marketing for a global macro fund at a point where global macro was in a terrible spot. Mm-hmm. And so I was about to write off the entire industry. I was looking for something new. I was bored. And it was just really good timing. We started, when I joined, we were building out the Funds for Food charity event. And so it was just nonstop from the moment that basically I met you and Chris, our co-founder. And, it was just really fun. I'd never really been in a role where we were building something,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been building stuff every single day since then. So it was a pretty easy leap of faith to make. It's gone from building out names and relationships across the industry, and it's just, we're at the center of all of it. And I think we're also doing a lot of really cool things on the tech side too, that's taking, the version of Cap Intra that I saw from my marketing seat and thinking about ways to reinvent how we're doing that with the software and the events and everything that comes through iConnections lens.
So it's interesting. So down at Global Alt a little more than a month ago, Guy and I, we were kind of like a little bit of an eye candy. You were up there a lot on the stage.
By the way, I just found this out. Guy is eye candy.
Yeah, that's
like, I can't believe how many women are like, Guy.
It's absolutely.
They love Guy.
Let's edit that out. But
no. That stays. Okay, but we had an epiphany because we were down there and we we were on stage a bunch and we had a lot of fun with a lot of those panels. But then I was waiting to go on one of my panels and I look up on the screen and there it is, Eli Manning, a guy who delivered you two Super Bowl titles, guy. Okay. And then all of a sudden I see Caitlyn up there. It's just a fireside, one-on-one. And I kind of had this epiphany. I think I looked at you and I said, Guy, okay, she's done a great job putting this whole thing together, but she's actually crushing it on stage. And so I said, move over, eye candy. We got a new brain that's going to join us on the Off the Tape. So talk to us what that has been like for you, because talk about just being thrown into it a little bit. I saw you on stage a bit. I know, Ron, you've been doing that a long time, right? Like on the on-stage sort of thing.
For a while now.
But it's nervous,
so
right?
wait,
like,
I need to sort of set this up.
Yeah.
So when we were working our way towards the 22 event, it was our first in-person event because, we ran for 2 years basically as a tech platform. Leading up to that, I remember saying to Caitlyn, and this was a moment where I felt like, okay, I had a great insight into how her brain works. I said, I really think you should do an interview on stage because you're the COO of the business. It'll help get you in front of our audience in a bigger way. It's good for you from a career standpoint. And her original response is basically what everyone's is, no way. Yeah. Like, I don't want any parts of that. That sounds terrifying.
It's called NFW, guy.
But,
that's what the kids say.
But then the NFW, exactly. It was a total NFW moment. But then the next day she came back and said, can we talk about that again? And I learned in the process of getting her to do that, and that she ultimately, of course, did it. She was on stage interviewing Chris Voss in that first event. I discovered that once you plant an idea in Caitlyn's head that's kind of a challenge for her, she really can't say no. So
she's got a challenge you're dealing with us every other week. I'm going to tell you that right now because, Guy's not going to pull any punches on this one.
No, but it's great to have another voice and somebody that looks at things through a different lens without question. And I'm glad you brought up 22, and let's just sort of backtrack a little bit because thinking about iConnections over the last couple of years, 22, but 23 was last year, and some of the conversations that we had going into that January of 20, you were, I don't want to say scared but you were apprehensive in terms of the landscape. If you recall, crypto was breaking down. A lot of the conference was sort of, basically positioned around crypto and the space. And there obviously was a concern, but I think you learned something extraordinarily valuable that sometimes that's the best environment to have a conference like that. And I think that gave you a lot of confidence moving forward, understanding now the importance of your platform. So speak to that.
Yeah, so what I've learned after doing this for a pretty long time now is portfolios are just always morphing, right? They are always adapting to whatever the current market circumstances are. So in moments where, I would assume I wasn't running this business in 08, but if we had an 08 type event, I'm assuming all businesses are shrinking, right, in that kind of environment. But ours has never gone backwards. In all the years I've been doing this, which is about 10 years now, every year is bigger than the prior year. And even when there are moments like the crypto meltdown in 22, and honestly, 23 was a pretty rough year for a lot of categories within alternatives, private equity, venture, both, big categories that really struggled to raise money. They still were there in big numbers and they still got meetings in big numbers. And I remember on the podcast we did, I think it was On the Tape in mid-January leading into the event, I talked about how, at least at that point, private equity was slightly below where they should have been in the meeting count leading into the event. In the end, I think they came out even, and some of them had a tremendous number of meetings. Investors are constantly moving and shifting what's in their portfolio, and also always looking so far ahead that if you're a fund manager in this space, the worst thing you can do is just disappear. You have to be in front of the investors at all times. Even if you're not going to get a check in that moment, you're always just maintaining or building new relationships. And that's what the event and, what our business is really all about. We're fortunate, I guess, to be at the center of this face-to-face world with a tech platform that helps link everyone. And as long as the regulations for, alternative asset managers force them into this kind of marketing model, hopefully we'll continue to be at the center of it.
Yeah, let's talk about that because it's interesting. It's CNBC's Fast Money. We were down there for 2 days. We had like a A-list group of guests. Like for us, it was like kids in a candy store because you put together not just the alligators and the fund managers, but people from all different sort of financial institutions. They all descend on this event. And for us, when we think about it, it's like we kept on hearing that it's a difficult environment to raise capital. And you'd think, when the global alts, I mean, the stock market was up 3-4%, rates had come in a bit, you know what I mean? Like it seemed like a really good investment environment for alternatives. So Caitlin, talk to us a little bit about this push and pull because there's some of the biggest, names in the business are there. And you think, okay, well, those folks should not have such a hard time raising it. It's a hard environment. So let's talk about the event, getting people in person. Let's talk about the platform, which really actually sustains the relationships once you have those reps with all those meetings over a few periods a day. And let's just talk about the environment. Like, is it as hard as a lot of folks are saying out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like a lot of fund managers, they think in terms of just their batting average, right? And one of the good things about what we do and the size of the event is that if you're an investor, you're going down there and you have, we had 850 funds. And even in that number, I think, 360 that were over $1 billion. And then just as many that were on the smaller side. So if you're a fund manager looking to fundraise, the good thing about going to our event is that there's allocators who are looking for funds of all different sizes. And, they might not be looking for that emerging manager at the start, but they're getting that introduction. They're using that as their moment to do that due diligence and really raise money and, focus on that. So I think that from that perspective, fund managers need to be in the room, like you were saying.
Yeah, for sure. And this is not like selling a used car, right? This is the longest sales cycle in the world. You've got people allocating billions of dollars. They're not going to do that after a 5-minute meeting. This is a very long-term sale. They expect to build relationships with the fund managers for many years, most of the time, especially when you talk about the emerging category.
Well, let's talk about the emerging category because in the last month since I've been back there, I've had 3 friends that I just know in the business. One was private equity, one is a multi-manager, like multi-strat sort of equity linked sort of thing, and another one is sort of in venture tech focused. Reached out to me. They saw me down there doing our podcast, doing Fast Money from there, and they're saying what is iConnections? I need to raise capital for this fund that I'm going to be launching. Again, these are 3 very different sort of funds. What's kind of the sweet spot, I guess, for someone coming into the network?
So the sweet spot used to be funds below $1 billion, and now it's getting harder to identify the sweet spot because the event has attained such prominence that we have every imaginable investor type, every imaginable fund type. About half of the event were hedge fund strategies. The other half were illiquid strategies, so PE, private credit, venture, real estate. And all sizes are coming. I mean, we had funds that were way over 100 billion, and we had funds that are literally startup funds that are, the right pedigree, and they're just trying to get out there pre-launch to start, just generating interest. So I'd say that for us, it doesn't make any sense for a small if you're like not sure you want to do a fund, it doesn't make sense because it's an expensive event. But if you are like full steam ahead, it's crazy to not be at this event. We had 1,000 allocators in the building, 15,000 meetings took place. There's really no other event like it in the world.
All right, talk to me though really quickly though. So let's just say you are planning to launch. Let's say 6 months out, you have an anchor sort of investor, and that I'm looking at iConnections. I'm looking at the website. I see the events that are coming up. You can get on the platform before, that.
Yeah, you absolutely can.
And I think that's really important. So what goes on there if you say, okay, I'm planning this launch. I'm at 20% of what I want to launch with, that sort of thing. How do you use the platform in the lead up to some of those in-person events?
So the way we work with all of our customers, all of our fund manager customers, is first you become a member of the tech platform. That gives you access to the system. There are thousands of investors in the system, and those investors are attending multiple events throughout the year. Now, our industry, while we use the tech platform to connect everyone, what the platform is actually amazing at is helping you navigate the various events. it's a face-to-face industry is the reality. Investors are not getting up in the morning and saying, I want to log into the platform and go reach out to a bunch of fund managers. That's just not the dynamic of the interaction in the space. So you become a member of the platform, and then there are, we'll probably run close to 20 events this year that are what I'll call larger events. Some are with groups like CNBC, Forbes, Anthony Scaramucci's SALT events are all partners, and they all use the platform for their events. And then there are smaller cocktail events. Once you become a member, you can attend all of this stuff.
Okay.
Now, there are different price points for these things depending on, how big and prominent the events are. Sohn, San Francisco, uses the platform. Capitalize for Kids in Toronto uses the platform. So you become a member, and then you have this plethora of events that you have to choose from. And, depending on where you are with your budget and how big your launch is going to be and how soon it is, then you have some financial decisions to make. But the one that no one should miss if you're serious about building out your fund business is the Miami event for sure. And I'd say all of the SALT events that took place. We actually just did one in the Middle East, which was, a couple thousand people, super well attended. So it's really the software first, and then that gives you access to everything.
And we want to talk about that. But before we do, not that I was ever a professional athlete for a myriad of different reasons, talent being obviously the biggest one, but you work your entire year towards a goal, Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, whatever it is, you win, you take a week off, and then you're right back at it. And that's really what happened both, the last 2 years, but this year specifically, Caitlin, because it was an amazing conference. So you have that final day, you take that collective sigh, that relief breath, you give yourself a few days, and then you're right back into it. So speak to the planning right now around what's going to take place 10 months from now in January of 2025 back in South Beach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, each year from, the event has gotten bigger and bigger. And the other thing, too, I would add just to Ron's comment earlier is that I think where our platform is really valuable is it's not just something for hedge funds who are used to needing to fundraise, but the private funds, the illiquid strategies, they're also finding immense value in coming to our events and raising assets. And, they haven't had to think about that before. Venture funds haven't had to think, how do I meet institutional investors? How do I fundraise? So there's a lot of value there.
That cap intro element is totally new to that world.
Right.
True.
Exactly. And so that's part of why it's grown. We have the hedge fund space and we have all of these other liquid strategies that are also wanting to be there. So we've outgrown the Fountain Blue. We've outgrown Eden Rock.
Think about that for a second. You've outgrown those. So the Fountain Blue, which is a huge property, I don't know if people have been there, but it is an exquisite, huge property. You've outgrown that. And then the subsequent couple of other hotels you had to book out. So that's obviously testament what you're building. So expand on that. You've outgrown,
right.
You're sort of out-kicking your coverage now, as we say.
And you can imagine you're talking about the space. It's 2 hotel properties. If you've been to the Fountain Blue, the names are confusing. It's convoluted. It's really a challenge for allocators. The way that our events work, the managers have a fixed booth location. It's the allocators who are walking around to the different meetings. It can take anywhere. If you're walking from one venue to the other, it can be a 10-minute walk potentially.
Right.
So actually what we're doing for next year is moving the entire event on the meeting days to the convention center. And we're super excited about it. I think it'll streamline the location of the meetings. It'll make it much easier for allocators to find where they're going and just lessen that burden of walking around.
All right, let's talk about this because you kind of alluded to it. So, Ron, in the last few months, you've been to Abu Dhabi, you've been to Miami, which has obviously become a huge hub for a whole host of different investing activities. And then in November, you were in Singapore, which we keep hearing more and more about, definitely as kind of Hong Kong has kind of had some issues over the last few years or so. So when you think about these 3 hubs, you think about now it's global. It's not just regionally based, these allocators and these fund managers. What's the vibe on global investing right now? I feel like we spend more and more time right now, Guy and I at least, talking about the U.S. because just the way we've come out of COVID relative to other parts of the globe and what's gone on in Europe with the war in Ukraine and the like, and some of the tensions in China. But these other hubs are emerging and it's becoming increasingly global. What's the vibe right now? Because again, you were just in Abu Dhabi just a week or 2 ago.
We were invited to participate in an event called Investopia, which is run by the Ministry of the Economy of the UAE. It's an initiative that was led by His Excellency Abdullah bin Tuq Al Mari, and he created this investment conference as a way to really feature the UAE and to welcome the investment community into the UAE. So they have done an amazing job also in connection with ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Markets. They are also incredibly active at attracting the fund industry into the region. So this event series was created. We became the Cap Intro partner to the event. So we were just there last week, and they had 2,000 people. It was an unbelievably successful event. You had some of the biggest thought leaders in the Middle East on stage speaking at that event. And I'll say it is by far the most popular region for our industry right now. I mean, there is there's not just, there's always been a lot of money in that region because the oil wealth is so significant. But the region has shifted, in my opinion, in a way where they are trying to connect with the rest of the world and the global investment community in a more strategic way than I think I've seen them do before. And they've also opened themselves up to a much broader span of funds. I think we talked about this in the last show. 10 or 15 years ago, the only groups I really heard about in this region, raising money in this region, were, Blackstone, Carlyle, Apollo, the biggest names in the business. But now I'm hearing stories about funds opening in this part of the world at much smaller sizes, and they are going there multiple times a year. So I think the Middle East is absolutely on fire. And I think that's great. I think it's great for the industry. I think it's great for the world, because the more business we do with each other, I feel like the better it is for humanity. The other spot where we've seen a similar dynamic is Singapore. Singapore saw, I think it's like 400 or 500 family offices open in Singapore in the last couple of years. I mean, it has been an unbelievable flow of capital into that market. I think a lot of that probably had to do with what was happening in Hong Kong a few years ago. You definitely saw flows from China coming into Singapore. But I will say, I would say in the last 6 months, I feel like Hong Kong is sort of bouncing back. I think there was obviously a lot of uncertainty with the China takeover, and I don't know if you could call it a crackdown, but it definitely was a shift in the vibe in Hong Kong. I feel like that has very much stabilized. I think funds are now kind of excited to be in both of these locations.
Do us a favor for our audience who's not familiar with that term family office, because it's something that is becoming increasingly important in this global investing landscape. And it's a name that I think like some people kind of throw around. For you guys, it's a really important demo, and it's something that has emerged from a more institutionalized place. Talk to us about what it means and how they are playing an increasingly important part of what you guys are doing, and obviously in the funding environment too.
Yeah, so a family office is formed generally by an individual or family who achieved a high level of success, right? So they now have wealth on the order of, I would say, it's usually you'll start to hear about a family office around 40 or 50 million of net worth. And this is when your net worth is large enough that you probably need a few people to look after both the investment portfolio, the assets, and usually there's a family business that's tied in with this. Like that's probably 80-90% of the time. So the combination of things, it's complicated. It's not like, oh, I can just open my Schwab account and manage this thing by myself.
But it's institutionalizing it to get access to alternatives. It's essentially, right?
Absolutely, right. It's the recognition that I have enough wealth here that I have to manage this in a more professional manner. So they create a team generally, and that is what makes up the family office. And usually, for our event, our threshold is usually about 100 million in net worth that family office has to be at least 100 million in order to qualify for our events. And we choose that threshold because we want them to be able to write a big enough check to funds attending our event so that it's worth everyone's while. And generally at 100 million, you can cut a check for $1 million, $2 million if you find a fund that's a good fit for you. But the explosion in the family office category has been unbelievable. I mean, we had probably 350 single family offices. So that's an office that's dedicated just to the needs of one family. and then another probably close to 100 multifamily offices in the event. And the multifamily offices are formed when two or more families get together and say, hey, we're kind of looking at the same stuff. Why don't we share the investment team so we spread those expenses across both of our portfolios? And then, those become sometimes huge businesses, and you'll have hundreds of families in the end, all managed under one multifamily office.
Caitlin, I get bogged down in the minute to minute of the market. I could tell you where the S&P is pretty much to the, half a point on any given point of the day without question. Much to I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm not proud of that. It just happens to be the case.
Well, I'm glad it's you and not me.
Well, that's going to be my question, because you obviously look at the world through a much different lens at a much different level. What did you take away from the conference, just hearing all the different conversations going on, the enthusiasm people had, some of the things people were concerned about? What was some of the takeaways from the conference we just had a couple months ago?
Yeah, I think when Ron was on the podcast just a week before the conference started, we talked about what strategies were in vogue. And the majority of the meetings, we talked about punching average, this idea that, global macro funds represented a certain number of our total fund attendance, but then they were punching well above their weight in terms of meetings. And I think that speaks to what we heard from all of the speakers and just in general, the sentiment that was there. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, of course, with the political environment, with the rate environment, growth. There's a lot of unknown. And I think that was what came through in all the conversations. There's things that could go in different directions. And for an allocation standpoint, that's a good time to invest in global macro. And so I think that was pervasive in terms of the themes. Private credit, that's always another thing that comes up. The main thing there is that private credit continues to grow and grow. There's a ton of interest there, but it's a complex opportunity, right? You need a team a lot of times to manage that operationally and really source those opportunities. So, speculation on will regulation increase around that came up quite often too. And that was another area where, of course, on the meetings we saw a lot.
So when you walk away from those conferences, it reinforces everything you probably knew going in, like the importance of what you're doing without question. And what we've done with you in collaboration, these off-the-tape segments where we interview, we've probably done anywhere from 15 to 20 of these now over the last year and a half, where we'll talk to, obviously, some of the funds that are within your network. So how do you think about that, giving some of these guys and gals a voice in this medium? Because you're going to be part of it very soon.
Yeah, I think it's hard, right? Like, as someone who sat in plenty of meetings with our CIO when we would pitch our fund, I think it's really hard to cut through the noise, right? There's a reason that a lot of the big name funds are more recognizable, but a lot of these other fund managers, again, we have 1,000 funds in our ecosystem, have really interesting strategies and really interesting stories. So I think that a big part of that, and hopefully what we'll do, is start to explore that a bit more, give people the opportunity to tell their story, and also just walk through what it looks like to try to fundraise and, in this type of environment where it's even harder.
Yeah. I think what people don't realize is that the alternative investment industry is one of the only industries in our entire economy that by law is restricted from openly marketing, right? There's, I guess, pharma to some degree had the same issue, but now they're all over television, right? Every other commercial is a pharma commercial. But in alternative investments, they're not allowed to market in any kind of open way, which is why it's very much a face-to-face business. What I love about working with you guys in the Off the Tape series is it gives our more maybe outgoing managers a chance to speak to their experience, what they see in the market. And, not everyone is going to be ready for CNBC necessarily. But this collaboration between us gives our managers who are like kind of ready to take that next step a chance to get some exposure that, otherwise it's tough in our industry because of the limitations on the marketing.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Ron, because again, we see it more and more. We have a lot of great financial services partners that, from FactSet and CME, who've been with us from the get-go. You guys got on the train like right shortly after we launched, and SoFi and Current, and there's many others. And I think a lot of these financial services companies are seeing just like these new mediums, how investors or people in the ecosystem are kind of connecting and getting familiar with new ideas and how to kind of use this technology. And oftentimes it is technology. And think about it, you guys were built on technology to do this IRL sort of stuff and the importance of that, but then also recognizing the media aspect of it. And so what you said about the regulation is really important, but anybody can go on and talk about what their pedigree is, what their experience is, what their views on the markets. And we say this all the time because Guy and I, while we have cameras in front of our face or mics in front of our face a good part of the day, we spend a lot of time offline talking to people about how to go about this. And I think back to how I started in the career in the alternative investment space. You couldn't find a picture of Steve Cohen. It didn't exist anywhere, right? Like, and now these folks, and forget Steve, but I just saw, we're going to put it in the show notes, an article about these multi-manager platforms that was in the Wall Street Journal. These guys and gals, they recognize the importance of branding right now. And I think it's really important as we think about our partnership as we go into our third year. We want to give voices to people who have really important things to say, who maybe didn't have an outlet prior to and from that. So what I would say to you guys out there listening to this, who are part of the iConnections platform, who want to be part of the iConnections platform, reach out, because you guys, I know, are going to be doing more and more. And that's one of the reasons why you're here with us right now, why
absolutely.
Caitlyn is going to be doing that. And we're just always thinking about different ways to collaborate to people in the ecosystem in general.
Without question. We've had a bunch of success stories, too, that come to mind. Chris Sidiel, obviously, if you think about him from the Ambrose Group, he's been on CNBC now a few different times. Yeah. We met him at your conference 2 years ago. We saw him again this year. And Dr. Arsani Williams from the Logos Group, fantastic. I mean, the network was thrilled when they were able to speak to him, clearly in terms of what's going on in healthcare and big cap pharma. So the success stories are there. And I think bringing Caitlyn into this mix is just going to add to that.
Well, the other thing, it's a big flywheel, right? So like, for instance, you guys give us a bunch of strategies, a bunch of ideas. They came on the pod. Then we were going down to do Fast Money from there. And we're like, well, we'd love, we met these people through you guys. These are great voices. They've come on the show, that sort of thing. And Dr. Williams, he actually was on a panel. We didn't even know about it. You guys, I think, had heard him on the thing. So a lot of great stuff going on in the media front. I think we're just kind of scratching the surface on it.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you suggested that people reach out, because I think 99% of the people that you have interviewed that came through our network, we identified them, reached out to them, and made the suggestion. And they said, "Oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. Sure, we'd love to do it." We would love for the funds to reach out. They generally don't think of marketing in this way because of the regulations, but you're absolutely right, Dan. They are completely within their rights to talk about their market views, how they see markets evolving, and we would love to have more interaction in this way. So hopefully this will generate some more interest.
It's absolutely going to happen. And with Caitlyn there, I think that will I think assuage any concerns that maybe some of the people in your network may have, like, oh, we know Caitlyn, we're comfortable with Caitlyn, which is another reason I think this is going to be a success. And I think also you'll ask questions and you'll have a different perspective than both Dan and I have in terms of these conversations, which is exciting. So maybe speak to that. Like, what are you looking forward to in terms of just learning this medium and just putting yourself out there a little bit?
Other than being in a room with Guy.
I know, right? That's the main thing. I get to hang out with the two of you. That's by far the best part. No, I mean, I think it's a lot of hearing the stories, right? Like, I'm very much looking forward to. It's easy because we have so many to be a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of our community. But I'm looking forward to really helping to connect the dots. That's all it takes. Like you said, there's a flywheel. If we hear a really good story and then we understand that story better, we can then help connect that member of the community to other funds, whether it's other CIOs or decision makers or fund marketers. A big part of our business is also everything that happens in between the conferences, right? We're working on a big software tool where you can, as a fund manager, help plan road shows and travel. And that's a great opportunity. I think that'll connect nicely to what we're doing here, because we can help hear these stories and help people find broader networks of others in the industry that they can help learn marketing from. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that.
What are you excited about, Ron, in 2024?
So this year, we are on the cusp of releasing a new module in our tech platform called our Roadshow module. And this will enable fund managers who are traveling in between our events and other events. They are traveling all over the world, going from city to city, generally doing roadshows. You go into a city, you camp out at a hotel, or you go to offices of investors in that city, and you'll do, maybe 5, 10, 15 meetings over the course of a few days. Our roadshow module is backed up by a roadshow concierge group, which will assist our clients in scheduling, in confirming meetings, in booking their car service, their airline, their hotel, whatever they need, restaurants. We have a partnership that we're about to implement with OpenTable.
Mm-hmm.
So we are trying to become a full solution for those funds that are out there marketing. So for us, this is super exciting because it takes what we're incredibly good at in the events and extends it outside of the events into all of that time that exists, in between when we generally see our clients, and helping them do what they're doing in all those other days of the year. So that is the kind of big push this year.
Well, we're looking forward to it as well. So we're thrilled. The relationship is extraordinary for us. I hope you feel the same way. We're so happy that Caitlyn's going to be on board in terms of the off-the-tape segments. And Ron, again, I want to thank you for your friendship. And obviously, Caitlyn, thank you for everything you've done for us as well.
No, thank you guys. It's been a good run, and I'm glad it's continuing. So thanks so much for the support.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.